Welcome in. We are live before lock. That's right. 58 minutes. We have you here to dissect and break down every single possible angle for this Clippers-Suns game tonight. We have a couple of things to look at, minor injury issue, and then also just how this series has transpired so far. Maybe try to get ahead of the narrative, the game flow. Not just me, of course. Greg Ehrenberg is in the house, and you can follow Greg at Ehrenberg DFS on Twitter. I'm at Shander Show Tonight Show, brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. We always have a ton of great things available for you across the Awesemo Plus Platinum community. But before all of that, we need to say hi to Greg and make sure he's doing all right. What's happening, brother?
I'm good. Most importantly, though, this is what everybody wants to know about. Why are you wearing a Red Sox shirt? I know that's not what you thought I was going to say, but why the Red Sox shirt?
So, okay. I have this shirt from a bet that I lost like 3 years ago for a Phillies Red Sox series. And I made a bet with a radio host who's out in Vegas, and I lost the bet, and I had to wear this on my stream for like a week. Just so happened that before I came on, I was wearing a shirt, baby, as I now have a 4-day-old baby, got a bunch of crap on the shirt, and I figured, all right, let me just grab. And look, I gained about 12 pounds in the hospital. So this is one of like 3 shirts right now, Greg, that I know I could grab and put on that actually fits. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. The Philly people are probably like, oh, my God. But I'm glad you, the always perceptive Greg Ehrenberg, leads with my shirt, not the 4-day-old kid. Thank you. I expect nothing less.
And you know what, too, also, because I saw the Red Sox shirt right away, and I was trying to lead you on as be like, hey, I'm going to ask him some really nice questions about what it's like to be a first-time father for everybody. I said congratulations to you off the camera, and I was like, hey, I should probably do it when the show starts. I was like, no, much more pressing that we address that the Philly guy's wearing a Red Sox shirt. But yeah, so I mean, everybody, first of all, also all the more reason you guys should like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because Eytan, new father, and also, just do it for him. But also there's going to be a point in time where his son grows up and he says, Dad, how many likes did you get on your first show back after I was born when you were with Greg Ehrenberg again? And he doesn't want to have to give some poor answers like, I don't know, 40, right? So let's get the like numbers up so this boy can be proud of him.
Absolutely. Let's see. How many likes do you think before I have the wife bring him downstairs and make a live appearance on the show? Because that's doable. And I don't want to set a low bar by any means. So 500, 750, 1K. I think we can get to any of that. And look, I have no problem. There is no shame in this household pimping out my newborn child for likes on this program, Greg, just so you know that.
Yeah. So listen. Let's set the bar at how many people are watching right now? Because I only keep the YouTube chat up. I don't have
486 now. Now we just began, so as you know, people are going to get in. We've got about 5. See, just bumped up now, about 500 and counting.
All right, so let's say 500 likes then.
Okay, we're already at 120.
All right, yeah, let's get them up. 500 likes, and your kid will hop on and they'll give out some DFS advice, right? How he's old enough to be gambling now. Was he a week old?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
He already hit his first 2-leg parlay last night. Absolutely. He's got a social security number coming. So as soon as that social security number is here, Greg, I get to set up accounts on FanDuel, DraftKings, all of that. It's a brand new person.
That's good. And also you could take out credit cards in his name. So look, you get in gambling trouble. It's like, hey, look, it's my kid. It's my kid's money.
I love it, man. Look, you know what? I am just surprised that I can sit up and my eyes are open. Everybody here, all of the parents here on our channel warned me, scared me, Lofty, Chris, everybody. Oh, you're never going to sleep. You're going to be a zombie, all these other things. Honestly, I'm happy to be here. It's a little bit of a distraction, I will admit, and I'm not complaining, but it's surprising how I'm not as tired as I thought I would be. At least. Well,
also, here's another thing to consider. You're a radio guy. You're used to not having sleep anyway, right?
Yeah. So that's another thing. I did overnights for about a year. And from there, I shifted into a morning show. So for about like 2.5 years, I was either working from 2 to 6 a.m. or I was working from like 4 to 10 a.m. So yes, I am completely like, I'm sure I have some sort of clinical issue with sleep deprivation. It's that bad. So Lofty's bitching like, oh, I can't sleep. I'm like, dude, I haven't slept in 5 years. So, all right. I'm going to stay on this in order to get more likes, in order to bring the kid on. So let's at least just look at everything that we have here, big picture. And look, we'll talk about the game. We'll talk about the game flow and see how you kind of feel this series swing back and forth. And by the way, we are at 171, so I might have to send a text to my wife sooner than later to bring this kid down. As soon as we hit 500, we'll make sure that he's ready to go. I have to turn the light off and everything before child services hits me with this ring light. But Greg, let's talk about how you kind of feel right now. We've had a bunch of these single game showdowns. We know we're going to build a lot here from captain mode, MVP as well with FanDuel, but how are we approaching, you specifically leading and kind of leading the direction here? How are we approaching this game tonight? We did see one turn in the series. The Clippers were able to stay alive, if you will. Chris Paul is back. I know we have to factor in a couple of guys, maybe not injured, but playing through something with Marcus Morris and campaign to a lesser extent. So just overall, how you see this game on the slate tonight. You're about to place a couple of, about to put a couple of rosters in. What's your overall feel for tonight?
Yeah, so first of all, and I saw this being debated a little bit in the YouTube chat when it first came in, where people were really, I don't know about people, at least a couple of guys were going back and forth about whether they should roster Paul George or not. To me, it's a pretty easy yes. So the overall highest priority on the slate to me is Paul George. The reason being is that amongst guys to pay up for, also the top end players aren't nearly as expensive in this contest as there are in, say, the Hawks Bucks game where there's Giannis at the top and there's Trae Young. So it's not that hard to get to Paul George. And the other thing, too, is comparing him to guys like Chris Paul and Devin Booker. They're competing with each other for touches and usage on offense. Paul George doesn't have that competition now that Kawhi Leonard isn't in the lineup. So Paul George's usage rate north of 35% in every single game so far this series. I don't really see any reason that's going to change today. So Paul George is the highest priority, and that's where I think we should be starting our lineups with.
Absolutely. And I think the only conversation to be had now, really, when we're building a captain here for Paul George, clearly the go-to, but it's also the pivot, right? Because everybody's going to roll with Paul George. So for the majority of lineups, I imagine there's going to be a lot of exposure to Paul George as your captain, but also knowing that he's going to be the highest owned, I imagine, across the board captain. We start to look at some other options. And you mentioned, as far as Booker and Paul, they may kind of cancel each other out just because of competition for the ball tonight. Is there now another option at captain beyond Paul George, like Ivica Zubac, for example, who becomes workable, that isn't necessarily going to be super high owned, or at least you can be somewhat even with the field?
Yeah, Ivica Zubac to me is pretty clearly the cheap option to get to as a captain play. I'm surprised he isn't picking up more ownership on DraftKings. We only have him, 4% projected ownership in the captain spot right now. In my opinion, the number should be really a lot higher, especially because, the path to Zubac landing the optimal lineup as a captain, it's not that hard to see. He's played really well in each of the last two games, 44 and 31 DraftKings points. If he replicates those numbers, he's almost certainly going to end up in the first place lineup as a captain. And then also he enables us to pay up for Paul George, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, all in the same lineup. So if you have Ivica Zubac put up, even like 25 fantasy points, and if, say, Chris Paul, Devin Booker each go for 40 plus, Paul George maybe goes for 50 plus again, and then I think there's a pretty good likelihood that Ivica Zubac lands in the captain spot in the optimal lineup, just because I don't know that there's any other cheap player that's even close to his ceiling.
Right. So kind of looking at it where we have Paul George as the obvious dominant one, Zubac now becomes that great workable lower cost option. Now there's a bunch of middle ground, right? And right up through Booker and Paul at the top to the Crowder, Bridges of the world, even if you start to look at what could be with Reggie Jackson and Patrick Beverley to a cheaper option. So we have a bunch, right, of ways and means to kind of maneuver through. So I'm curious, Greg, when you're building this lineup and you're looking at maybe a pivot from Paul George in some smaller lineups, because the majority has him as the captain, where are you looking as far as that middle ground, or maybe even taking a risk with Booker/Paul as your captain, knowing that, as you said, you could run into the circumstance where they kind of cancel each other out, or at least there's competition that could lessen somebody's performance?
Yeah, so here's the issue I have, at least in terms of a captain play, Devin Booker versus Paul George. I have Paul George projected for about 12 more fantasy points than Devin Booker, and there's only a $400 price gap between them. So with that in mind, Devin Booker is still fairly popular as a captain, as is Chris Paul, both from picking up 15% ownership. And, I don't think that the gap between Paul George to those guys is enough in terms of salary and current ownership. So, Chris Paul is going to be really popular in the captain spot. So is Devin Booker. So if I'm going to play one of the more popular captains, the answer to me is still Paul George.
Is there anybody that you're willing to take a risk on? And look, I think I'm totally in agreement with you. If I'm going to go a cheaper option to work a bigger lineup, it's going to be Zubats first and foremost. But I'm really intrigued with running Beverly. Not a ton of exposure as a captain, but I am intrigued with running him as a captain, knowing I can fit in the top studs as well and even round out that roster with the Zubats in a utility spot. Do you have any interest in working him or maybe even a higher cost option like a Reggie Jackson as a captain?
So you're asking Reggie Jackson and Patrick Beverly, were those
Correct.
the two names? Okay. So yeah, I slightly prefer Patrick Beverly on as a play on this particular slate. Number one, due to pricing. Number two, Reggie Jackson playing incredibly well in the playoffs. And actually, I think have you seen the Mr. June memes? Because I think those are really funny.
Yeah. Mr. June, right?
Yeah.
Specs was another one I saw.
So, I mean, he's absolutely been crushing in the playoffs so far. He's scored at least 33 DraftKings points now in 5 consecutive games. The one issue I have with him in the captain spot is, number one, his price is up. And then number two, Chris Paul is back, and I assume he's going to look a little bit more fit this game than he did last game. And Chris Paul, is arguably the best perimeter defender we've seen in the NBA, at least the best point guard defender over the last, 10 years at this point. So I think now that Chris Paul is back, and I think he's going to be a little more fit this game. He looked a little bit out of shape to me last game. Still played well from a fantasy standpoint, but I think that is going to hurt the production of Reggie Jackson a little bit. Not to the point where I'd want to avoid him or anything like that, but just to the point where I think that him at 7% ownership in the captain spot, that's a little bit too high from the field.
I know we'll talk a little bit more about punts, just kind of working them in the roster, rounding out as far as utility spots and lesser spots on FanDuel as well. But can you get to anybody super low cost here tonight? I mean, Craig, we didn't really talk about Terrence Mann as another option kind of in that range of Zubats, but I wonder if you could get to Craig, if you could get to somebody like Kennard as well to now justify the rest of your lineup being every single stud that's available.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely still get to Craig. He's the flat min in DraftKings Showdown. And also, it's going to be different FanDuel versus DraftKings. FanDuel, I wouldn't roster Torrey Craig. On DraftKings, yeah, for sure, he's viable. Even with Chris Paul back last game, he ended up playing 15 minutes, which, while it's not substantial, 15 minutes of Torrey Craig, that still has me expecting to score double-digit fantasy points at the flat min price. That opens up a lot of options. And then the other thing to consider, too, is that if all the high-end guys go off, the way that Torrey Craig lands in the optimal lineup isn't because he scores 20 to 25 fantasy points himself. It's more that, hey, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, Paul George, these guys all have big games. Then just by necessity, we're going to need a 2,000, 1,000 player in there. And that's where our spot where, 10, 12 fantasy points out of Torrey Craig, that's a fine, acceptable option. So, yeah, I think Torrey Craig is certainly in play for this slate. Currently picking up, what was his ownership? Way too low of ownership, actually. So yeah, Torrey Craig on DraftKings projected for 6% ownership. That is crazy low for a guy that I think is going to be in the rotation and has somewhat of a minutes floor and should be at least safe to score a handful of fantasy points. So, yeah, I definitely think that he's going under-owned in tournaments.
You think the number is just scaring people off? Like, he's a minimum, as you mentioned, 1K guy. How much can you really expect from him? Because I'm with you. I don't know what the initial reaction would be other than, oh, he's 1,000. I'm not going to even take that risk. But to your point, we know that for a 1K guy, he's going to be out there.
Yeah, so I think the reason people are not getting to him is just because there are a handful of viable cheap options in this game that still, for me, project a lot better than Torrey Craig. So, for instance, Ivica Zubats, we talked about him. Zubats on DraftKings has not been priced up at all in this series. As well as he's been playing recently, he's still 4,200 in the utility spot. So, easy enough. A lot of people are going to be playing Ivica Zubats because he's really cheap. Patrick Beverly, he's likely to be starting today. He's 3,800, so he's really cheap. So there are these other cheap options to get to, and these guys are higher priorities than Torrey Craig, but still I think Torrey Craig warrants more than the 6% ownership.
All right, we have the premium Slack up and running, cooking here. Also, some super chats we'll get to, starting out with our buddy Darren Unger. Greg, Paul George, cap, Eytan, Bridges, or Zubac, cap, CP3, Reggie Jackson. So you're getting the 4 or 4 here in a lineup. We'll assume it's DraftKings.
Wait. So does he mean captain? One of those guys?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Paul
Okay.
George, captain, Eytan Bridges. So it's 3. I apologize.
Okay. So
That's
Paul
C.
George at captain, Eytan and Bridges, or Zubats, CP3 captain, Reggie Jackson.
Zubats as the captain, it looks like. CP3 and Jackson.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I see it now. I
right.
scroll back and found it. So of those guys, my preferred combination would be the Zubats at captain with CP3 and Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get to many people other than those two. I think as far as high exposure for captains outside of just trying to work a couple of contrarian lineups, right? It seems like the majority of weight here. And look, for FanDuel as well, I don't know if you're getting to anybody outside of Paul George as your MVP, right? Because of the concern of Booker and CP3 going up. Eytan, it would take a lot for him to be the leader out there on the Suns. And think about what it would take for Paul George to play as many minutes as expected and not be the leading scorer out there.
Yeah, so Paul George currently projected for 67% ownership in the MVP spot on FanDuel. I think that number is actually a little bit low based on the big gap I have in projections between him, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker. I'm a little surprised that Chris Paul is picking up so much more ownership in the MVP spot than Booker. I do have Chris Paul projected slightly higher than Devin Booker, but not to the point that I think that Chris Paul is 50% more likely to be the higher scorer than Devin Booker. So to me, Paul George, I would play him actually more than 67% in the captain spot. I think it would make more sense to be like 75% on Paul George and then 15% Devin Booker and 10% on Chris Paul.
All right, another super chat here. And D. Owens, 89. Last man in, Johnson or Mann? Boy, Johnson got a lot of run because of foul trouble last game. I don't know how much you're heavy on him this time around.
I have Terrence Mann projected for about 6 more fantasy points. So the other thing to consider also with Cam Johnson is that game was very, very one-sided. Yep. And late in the game, for the Suns to get back in the game, they need to get more shooting on the court. So Cam Johnson is the best shooter on the team coming off the bench. So that also helped buoy his minutes. That, and also he played some garbage time, so that helped him out. But yeah, I think in this game, still like you said, there was some foul trouble, and I don't think we're going to see quite that many minutes from Cam Johnson. I gave him 26 today, which is a step back from last game. Cam Johnson, good real life player, good shooter, not really the best fantasy player in the world, at least not compared to Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann's played really well in the playoffs. So, for the season with Cam Johnson, played 23.3 minutes per game, averaged 17.75 DraftKings points. So I have Terrence Mann as slightly better fantasy producer. Also, the other thing to consider with Kawhi Leonard out, Terrence Mann has taken up a lot of those minutes and the usage. So Terrence Mann, I have him playing more minutes and as a better fantasy producer than Cam Johnson.
The wife is on standby, just so everybody knows. We are not even... Well, I guess we're over halfway to our goal for 500 likes. We're at 235 now. We've got nearly 1,000 people watching. So I think Greg set a very fair bar here. If you want to, I see a couple of people. We want baby Shander. Look, it's a very simple process here, right? We don't ask for much at all. And normally we just ask for a like and make sure you're subscribed. That's the big thing. We want you subscribed to the Awesemo channel here. But in this case, she's ready. Like, she's ready, Greg, to bring the baby down, but I don't want to tease. I'm not going to give in. This is not like we got to 497, so let me give in. I feel like I need to start being a strict parent today, so I'm going to draw the line here when it comes to 500 likes.
Yeah. Plus, like, you can't just be whoring your kid out a week into his birth, right? Like, there's got to be some sort of say, like if you just sit there and be like, yeah, 50 likes, I'll show him. Then I mean, what's his value, right? You gotta pump up his value.
That's right. Yeah, this isn't a 1K guy on DraftKings tonight. All right, no offense down there to the bottom, but this isn't a Dario Saric. I'm not bringing him down here. I'd like to bring down Paul George. All right, make you out there work for it.
Yeah, this isn't Jay Scrub that we're bringing out here, right? This is not some min price guys not in the rotation.
Is there a better name, by the way, in sports for a guy who's at the bottom end of the bench? Jay Scrub. I mean, my goodness.
I would say what were when Rusty Kuntz played? What were his numbers like? Because I mean, if he was like a crappy fantasy player, I'll bring up then yeah, that would be another good one.
All right, I'll give you that. That's a great poll right there. I was not expecting you on. I should now. Of all people, you're the best on your toes. So I should have expected a Rusty reference with that, by all means. Hey, look, you want to make sure you're taking advantage of what we have here. We mentioned ownership. NBA player rankings are free for you. So it's one of a couple of free premium tools we have tonight. NBA player rankings, MLB player rankings, and MMA fighter rankings. But why wait? $29.95 for the week. Awesemo Plus. It gets you everything you need to know. NBA season is still here, and we do offer the NBA streamlined packages, but for a couple of months, if that, maybe 6 weeks, if that. And then you're going to have to look at baseball, MMA, golf, a lot of things before football. So we want you fully inundated on the channel with everything across the board. $29.95. And if you want to bump it up to Awesemo Plus, Platinum, do that. NBA Live before lock. All caps, one word, it's the name of the show, and you'll get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, we're at $292, just saying. And I'll keep reminding people. I know people come in, people come out, so we'll keep reminding people that there is at least a prize. Look, last night, it was get to 500 likes, and Rinpack's going to shoot whiskey live on the show.
So that was something that we also did preseason. That was the first show I ever did with Rinpack was preseason basketball, which, nobody's taking all that seriously. Preseason NBA DFS, we're just kind of guessing who's going to play what minutes. And yeah, we're just having Rinpack do shots during the show.
That's amazing, man. Preseason, look, there's the gift and the curse of it, right? The negative is like, yeah, okay, we're breaking down DFS betting, whatever it may be preseason, but you learn a lot. You definitely can. It's not going to transfer over for stars and stuff. So I can't fault him for shooting whiskey when it comes to preseason. I guess that's maybe more a testament of working with me, where it's like, all right, Rinpack's going to shoot whiskey in the preseason, but shit, I got to work with Shander on a playoff game. Let me have that bottle handy. I'm surprised you're not pounding halfway through a bottle of vodka right now, 24 minutes into the show.
Hey, I don't drink. I just have my my water bottle here because I stay hydrated like a good boy.
Fair enough. There you go. Exactly right. Vice of choice, whatever it may be. All right. So, all right. We talked about just kind of working in captain mode, MVP. Is there, before we just look at really rostering out everything and looking at where guys make the most sense in utility non-MVP spots across the board, is there anybody else? I mean, Zubac was clearly a high pick. We talked about Patrick Beverley as well. Is there any low option, low cost, maybe is the better way to put it, guy on the Suns that you would take a shot at, or maybe even in the mid range, if you can work with a Mikal Bridges, a Jay Crowder as your captain, knowing that you're still going to pay a little bit and probably would have to sacrifice if it's Booker or Eytan in your lineup, but you could still get to three of the top guys in there as well.
So here's the issue. So you mentioned Bridges there. Bridges and Crowder are both picking up the same ownership as Ivica Zubac. And Zubac is also considerably cheaper than both those guys. So Zubac, 4,200 in the utility spot. Mikal Bridges, 5,400. Jay Crowder, 5,800. I have Zubac project for more fantasy points than both those guys, and he's a lot cheaper. So with that in mind, and also one other thing to add on top of it, they're both projected for more ownership Bridges project for more ownership in the captain spot. Crowder actually slightly less, but all comparable. So with that in mind, I think Zubac is a far better captain play than those guys. And it's hard for me to reason rostering like Mikal Bridges, $1,200 more expensive. I have him project for 8 less fantasy points than Zubac, and Bridges has more projected ownership in the captain spot. I just view them as weak plays relative to Zubac.
All right, makes sense. And I think that's what we'll probably keep coming back to now is Paul George, the obvious choice. But if we're looking at rostering anybody else in that captain spot, how do they match up first and foremost with Zubac, right? We're willing to forego a heavier owned captain for Zubac, understanding that from cost and return and who you can roster in, that seems to be the best pivot from George. Maybe, dare I say, the only real pivot from George.
Relative to ownership, I think
captain-wise, I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I understood, but relative to ownership, I would agree with that. I think that Devin Booker, I think that 15.5% for him in the captain spot is a little bit too much. Chris Paul, 15.5% in the captain spot. I think that's a little bit too much too. One thing I kind of think is interesting is that on FanDuel, Chris Paul is currently projected for more ownership than Devin Booker. And then on DraftKings, Devin Booker's projected for more ownership than Chris Paul. However, they're the same price on FanDuel, but Devin Booker is more expensive on DraftKings. So that's just a little wonky to me. But yeah, that aside, I mean, relative to ownership, the only two plays that I see as really considerably strong captain plays are Zubats and Paul George. If you want to go cheap, just so you could fit in more stars, if you want to go to somebody, like Patrick Beverley, if you want to maybe go to Terrence Mann, and because he has seen his minutes pick up lately, we've seen the kind of upside that he has. I think that he'd be a reasonable captain choice. Luke Kennard, his minutes picked up a little bit last game, but yeah, relative to ownership, I definitely think the two strongest captain plays are Paul George and Ivica Zubats.
Yeah, so we start to look now at the rest of the line, right? Filling guys out and knowing that it's going to be, unless we're going, even with Zubats, it's going to be tough to get all of the studs from the top if we want to throw Eytan in there as well. But I'm not going to fade Booker by any means, but I feel like of all of the options I have of the top cost guys from PG to Booker, Paul, even DeAndre Ayton, I'll probably draw the line there and have the cutoff there and not include Reggie Jackson in this conversation. But from the outside, and I ask and kind of defer to you here, Greg, from the outside, I could see myself getting to Devin Booker of those four significantly less than everybody else in that group. And some of it is based on he struggled, but also we saw this with Trae Young last night, where it's hard to have the conversation of, you're going to be underweight to a superstar. But seeing how this has played out, another game in LA, I could see Chris Paul, you mentioned, coming back in a little better shape, having the ball a little bit more. Eytan and Zubats is going to be an interesting matchup to watch. I think Zubats can have a great game, and so can Eytan as well. They're not going to negate each other by any means. And then, look, it's Paul George. You laid out everything about Paul George. So that's kind of my outside reasoning of why I feel like I would get to Booker less than the other three guys in that group of four studs tonight.
Yeah, I would agree. And the big thing also is he's just so expensive when, I don't think the pricing is quite correct. Given the role that Paul George is currently playing for the Clippers, I don't think that he should only be $400 more expensive than Devin Booker. I think that should be, over $1,000 price gap based on the projections I have for each of them. And the other thing to consider too is, I don't know how you feel about this, and this is very narrative driven. It's hard to know, but to me, I think one of the main reasons that Devin Booker struggled to shoot last game is I think the mask was probably bothering him a little bit. Yeah. He has the nose injury. He's wearing the mask. We've seen players, frequently wear that and struggle with shots at times during course of, big time NBA games. So I can't rule out that that's a factor that, he's clearly not 100%. Not that anybody's really 100% at this time of season, but, he has something that could really be inhibiting him. Is that anything that you're thinking about when it comes to Devin Booker? Is how is the mask and the nose injury? Did that potentially impact his efficiency last game?
I think that's a great point, honestly. And we get lost in the human elements a lot, but they come out. They come out in DFS. They come out in betting. They come out because we're talking about human beings. And to your point, I don't necessarily look. He was clearly it was not comfortable for him. Not to say that he was in pain, but you mentioned it. We see guys from LeBron to Kobe, people that are not normally wearing. Don't have to be Bill Laimbeer, right, to be uncomfortable in a face mask. So I do feel like it's still going to be an issue. And while Booker can bounce back and have a better night than we saw the first time out with the mask, it's a variable that I don't want to trust. Does that make sense? Like when you're putting your money out there for whatever it may be, you're rostering him, you're playing a prop, you're on Odd Shop or whatever it may be. That's a variable, Greg, that I don't want to trust or have to trust. And then look back and say, shit, here's another 5 for 20 night. He couldn't see. It was fogged up. He kept going over to the side. Like, I don't want to deal with that variable. So maybe that subconsciously, and then you bring it out to the surface, is a big reason why I think I and others would stay away from him, on top, of course, of the price.
Yeah, and to be clear, I certainly have exposure to Devin Booker today. I'm just saying I prefer Paul George at a similar price point.
Nobody's fading Devin Booker.
No, nobody. So, I mean, on a one-game slate, right? If you're playing multiple lineups, it's kind of hard to, like, who am I realistically fading? Like, who's somebody 0% of? For me, Payne today, Daniel Oturu. Like, these are the guys that are worth having, like, 0% of. Not Devin Booker. I just think Devin Booker should be less than 15% owned as a captain.
You mentioned Payne. Now, a lot of that, look, nothing is really working for Cameron Payne tonight, right? The minutes have been taken away with the return of Chris Paul. He's dealing with the ankle injury. I know he's going to play. He's been upgraded to probable, but still that lingers. And then he's also 6,800 on DraftKings for a guy who's not starting is a lot of money. So I don't think anybody would fault you, Greg, for redlining him entirely on your rosters tonight.
Yeah, I mean, relative to price, I think Campaign is one of the weakest plays on the slate. So he just hasn't been properly priced since the return of Chris Paul. So we saw Campaign have, ridiculous games to start the series when there was no Chris Paul. So game one, by the way, both games were starts for him. So game one against the Clippers, Campaign scores 32.25 DraftKings points. Game two, season high 52.75 DraftKings points. Game three, now this is a little bit of an outlier just because he got hurt during the game, but he only ends up playing 4 minutes, scoring 3 fantasy points. But you look at his playing time for the other games in the postseason when Chris Paul was totally healthy, because there was also games, earlier in the postseason where Chris Paul had the banged up shoulder, wasn't able to close games. But in the games that Chris Paul was healthy against the Denver Nuggets, Campaign played 19 minutes, 15 minutes, 17 minutes, and 13 minutes. So with that in mind, I have to expect that Campaign is going to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 17 minutes. And he simply is way too expensive for that kind of minutes time.
By the way, EMAC is in the house and has properly directed the conversation to masks and asks Jim Carrey or Michael Myers who wore it best. Now, I have to say, Jim Carrey, look, it's not a great movie. It's not going to be up there in the annals of history. But as far as a comedy is concerned, Jim Carrey's The Mask is a really underrated comedy. Again, I'm not putting it up there with Blazing Saddles or, Caddyshack here, Greg. I don't want you to be like, geez, man, I got to do another show with this guy. Say, no, trust me. I get it, like where it is in its place. But I would defer. I think Jim Carrey's Mask is one of the more underrated masks that we have in entertainment.
All right, so my all-time favorite mask moment in the NBA was earlier in the season when Kawhi Leonard broke his nose and he showed up looking like, in the episode of The Office where Dwight like cuts the face off of the mannequin and then wears it. That is exactly what Kawhi Leonard looked like. Kawhi just had this ridiculous looking mask that it looked like he just fashioned himself at home. And it wasn't even like cut evenly. It was really bizarre looking. That's the one that's my favorite all-time mask.
You're right. It does look like they had one of these CPR dolls in the back and they were like, shit, we don't have a mask for him. And they just sliced the face off and then we're cutting in the eye holes for him as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the picture because it's been a long time since I saw that. Because that was this season, wasn't it, that he broke his nose?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, let me try to find the picture of it real
Booker
quick.
has got to be at the LeBron was great too because it looked like Bane, it had this whole thing. The movie was out, so everybody was all jacked up. I remember Kobe had to wear one, but these guys were all wearing them just to wear them, like for injury stuff. Rip Hamilton, I think, was, and maybe Lambeer too. Those guys were the only ones that actually like voluntarily wore it after their injury was done.
Yeah, and did Rip Hamilton even actually have an injury, or did he just wear it?
I think it was like something that happened early on in his career. It wasn't anything major, but I believe because it wasn't in UConn. I think it was already in the pros where he was with the Pistons, and something happened and he had to wear it, and I think he just kept wearing it.
All right, so here it is. So Rip Hamilton. Mask first came along during the 2003-2004 season. Rip Hamilton broke his nose twice in the same season, and he was advised to wear the mask the rest of his career. So it actually wasn't a optional thing.
Yeah,
it was actually doctors told him that he had to wear it for the rest of his career. So yeah, there we go. I don't know that there's anybody who's just worn it, been like, this is a cool fashion thing to wear. The goggles are a different story.
Well, look, goggles. I mean, you have to go back to the OG Olden Polynice, right? I mean, the goggles are completely different, but I feel like Lambeer, and maybe that's the perfect example of somebody who has absolutely zero style sense. And I know I'm saying that wearing a Red Sox shirt, but maybe Lambeer was just like, oh, no, that's fine. I'll keep wearing. But yeah, I guess everybody, there was always the fear of you're going to get hit in the face. So you'll have to do it. You'll have to wear it. James Worthy, it's another goggle legend, of course. Yeah, there's some great goggles in the. I mean, look, if you expand it, Eric Dickerson, right? I mean, there's some great goggle wearers in just professional sports history.
Yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yes.
It's been a while. I mean, for me, I know in my day when, like kids didn't have contacts, everybody wore rec specs, like the kids wore rec specs. Like that was a big deal. But yeah, we don't have goggle wearers anymore. That's not a thing. Everybody just has contacts or gets the LASIK.
Yeah, and you know what else has gone to? It's a great point. You don't have the goggles, and now people have gone to LASIK. So we've skipped that step where it went from goggles to like those cool shades. Remember, Antoine Carr comes to mind, who would wear like those sunglasses. They were like athletic shades, if you will, out there on the floor. They look pretty badass compared to the goggles, at least.
Yeah, and by the way, also I want LASIK surgery so bad. I want to be like a robot. I want laser beam shot into my eyeballs because I have horrendous eyesight. It gets worse every year. So I don't qualify to get LASIK because you have to have it's like 3 years in a row without your prescription changing. Really? And yeah, because or else as long as your eyes are still changing, there's apparently no point in getting the LASIK. So the other thing too is I know as people who watch me, one of the reasons I can't watch myself on camera is I have really dry eyes from contacts I wear because I have astigmatism and just contacts don't fit me properly. So my eyes are constantly agitated and dry. So I blink so much. And it is every time I watch myself on any camera, I go, I want that camera to explode in my face because I just want to punch myself in the face. And it's so annoying to me. One of the many reasons I can't watch myself on camera. But also, anyway, long story short, I want LASIK surgery.
Wait a second. Does it hurt or is it just dry to where you constantly have to moisture them by blinking?
Yeah, it's just dry and like a little bit uncomfortable. So at the end of the day, especially because we're doing the show late and I'm wearing my contacts all day, like my eyes will just be beet red by the end of the day.
My goodness, man. Butthole Jenkins. Normally I figured we would go to Butthole when he's asking, us to cut the crap and just give us the best player on the slate. Corey Hart wore the best glasses hands down. Do you remember those?
Corey Hart. I have to look that up.
Spags. This is the first time I've seen Spags on a show that I've done in now I know I was off all week, in 2 weeks, and he couldn't wait I didn't even know Spags was watching, and he couldn't wait to slide that in about you.
Yeah, by the way, who is Corey Hart?
I don't know. Honestly, the only reason why I brought it up is because I thought maybe you would know, and I wouldn't sound like an idiot. I guess the baseball player is talking about?
I don't know. I Googled Corey Hart, and the first thing that came up was a Canadian musician.
Singer. Yeah, I have Corey Hart, baseball player for the Brewers.
Yeah, I don't know.
40 years old from Bowling Green. I don't know. There are no Google pictures of Corey Hart wearing glasses. So maybe it's a different Corey or a different Hart. I don't know. Maybe he's talking about Hitman Hart. Didn't the Hitman wear glasses?
We're dating me so much now. You everybody. This is. I don't know these. I don't know Canadian music either. Wait
a second. You weren't asked to know Canadian music. I think that was just the result of a Google search.
Nah, everybody's quizzing me on my Canadian music knowledge.
Wait, Canadian music knowledge. We've got Drake and who's the group that everybody hates? Nickelback, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
There you go. That's it. Okay. And Celine Dion, she's Canadian too.
Okay, wow, I didn't realize that you were so well versed in Canadian music. I don't know anything about Canadian music. I know Canadian fighters. We have Tanner Boser today. He won by a second round knockout of Ovin St. Preux. That is my that's my recent Canadian knowledge.
Look, if you have anybody that you know that's doing anything that we can bet on, please let us know. I don't care if it's sport or if it's a concert and the set list is coming out and you happen to have seen 50 different Celine Dion concerts, so you know exactly which show she's leading with and which hey, we'll take any advice we can get here, Greg. As I mentioned, parent advice from non-parents, betting advice from non-Canadians. I'll take it all.
Let's see. What else?
Are you looking for glasses or are you going back to the slate?
Yeah, we could go talk about the slate. I was just Googling more Canadian bands, but nothing of note came up.
Wait a second. I'm sure we're forgetting a major one here. Nickelback is the one everybody hates. We got Celine and she's just, because we know her and she yells and sings. Rush, I guess, is from Canada. I didn't know that. The band from Canada.
Nelly Furtado is from Canada, apparently.
No, he's from St. Louis.
Hey, listen, that's somebody else.
Oh, yeah. What am I talking about?
Yeah, you're thinking of Nelly the rapper.
Gee, maybe we should go back to the slate. I don't even see Tyler's face on the screen anymore.
No, he left. He's playing with his dog.
He's like, come out. Brian Adams, come on, you should know all of these. Yeah, Nelly the girl, I apologize. The Weekend. All right, see, this is what happens. Can't get 500 likes to see my kid, but we can definitely get every single major band / singer / rapper who's come out of Canada, right?
Yeah, listen, if we would have said 600 likes and we'll shout out your favorite Canadian band on the show, that we would have gotten to the likes way quicker than showing them your kid.
It's amazing how that works. All right. Tonight's show is, yes, actually, we do have a show, and there is a sponsor, and we are talking basketball, although I'm sure we're going to get derailed in a matter of seconds here. But the show tonight is sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight, and we have some pretty cool things going on over at MKF, specifically another deposit bonus of up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code Awesemo, right? Awesemo. That's what we do all the time. Awesemo. And you do everything that you want to do here on Monkey Knife Fight. You're totally in charge. NBA, UFC, golf, esports, soccer, everything. Monkey Knife Fight has it. And again, you can get started right away with that deposit bonus. First match up to $100. Player props contest, easy to play. They don't require a lot of time or commitment. You can just hang out, listen to what Greg has to say about who to play, who to listen to from Canada, and then you can go to Monkey Knife Fight, make some money, and you'll be good to go. So again, Awesemo is the code that you want to use for your first match deposit bonus of up to $100. I did see, as we're at 354. Now, here's the thing. You're a betting man. We've got 17 minutes. So that's the over-under, if you will, to get to 500 likes in order for my baby to come down on screen. So we're at 355 and counting. 17 minutes. Do we hit it?
No, I think it's become abundantly clear that nobody gives a shit about your kid.
That's fair. That's fair. That's all right. But you know what? We actually got a bunch of likes from it. So here's the thing. The joke's on you all out there where I don't need to show my kid. But if we get 450 or 500 or 375, then we've got likes. All right. We cried wolf and you answered. That's all that really matters here. Thank you for putting it so nice, by the way. And so
hey, listen, I'm just trying to be delicate, you know?
Exactly right. You and your delicate ways, right? Why the hell are you wearing a Red Sox shirt? Nobody gives a shit about your kid. I think we have a promo right there about Greg right there in a nutshell. I love it.
Yeah, what's your kid will be the promo in the next show.
No.
Yeah, and not a single person will sign up.
Nope, exactly right. Use promo code Shander's kid. You're like, what the hell is this? Get me back to an Awesemo thing. Oh my. I do, speaking of betting, I do have a couple of props I want to get out here before we end and lock up these lineups tonight. But I did see this on the chat where somebody was asking, or pardon me, on the premium Slack, I believe, somebody was asking about just a lower cost option that is not heavy owned, basically a low cost, low owned option that you're getting to a lot in your lineups tonight. Outside of Zubac, I think we kind of covered him.
Well, he's popular anyway, so
fair.
At least more than the field. Torrey Craig at the flat min is only 6% owned. It's also hard to say, what qualifies as low owned on a one game slate. I would say Patrick Beverley is worth more than 28% exposure to. Torrey Craig is worth more than 6% exposure to. So those are the two, at least relative to, and I'll refresh the ownership to see if it's changed at all, which it has not, but at least relative to our current ownership projections, those are the two that look the most under-owned.
Okay. Yeah, especially with Zubac being so heavily owned. So those two. Now, are you getting to both of those guys a lot tonight, or are those just it to answer the question as far as who jumps out as maybe the more obvious answer?
No, it's just the guys that I think are under-owned. Like I have in the build that I made, I have 18% Torrey Craig, and he's projected for 6% ownership. So, 3x the field relative to the ownership is what I have. So that was just kind of my barometers. Which guys do I have more exposure to than the field?
Awesome. All right. So as we continue here, mention a couple of punt options. We did talk about that with the captain spot specifically at the start of the show. Just looking again, we've covered a lot of different names here, and even on that mid-range, if you want to, the cheaper mid-range guys like a Patrick Beverley, 3,800, on DraftKings. Terrence Mann bumped up now to 4,400. So maybe even lower than that. And Torrey Craig has come up just because he's the 1K super low cost option there. But are you getting in? There aren't many. So I guess we can look at two specifically and how much you're getting to across the board exposure you're getting to in your lineups tonight, Greg. And first on the Clippers side would be Luke Kennard, and on the Suns side would be Dario Saric.
All right. So Luke Kennard to me, and what exactly is the question?
Which of those two guys, if not both of these guys, like how much exposure are you getting to as punt options in your lineup?
All right. So of the two, so Luke Kennard is currently projected for, a fairly substantial amount of ownership. We have 14, or not really that much, 14% ownership for Luke Kennard. But relative to, his price and ownership, I'd rather roster Torrey Craig. I have very similar projections for the two of them. Luke Kennard coming out a little bit higher, but once again, we have Torrey Craig is $1,200 cheaper, and he has about a third the ownership that Kennard has. So I think that Torrey Craig is the better play than Kennard. But yeah, I mean, he's not like a fade or anything on a 1-game slate.
No, I know. I was just kind of looking at options that we have to work in these super low cost guys. And Kennard makes sense, especially if you're trying to counter the ownership 2,200. I'm sure a lot of people are going to try and work him in towards the end of that. Is there an option now for Dario, knowing that, again, it's going to be that lower cost sliding him in? Are you getting to much at all on a 2K number for Dario Saric tonight, Greg?
No, I am not. I have basically everybody that I expect to be in the rotation today. I project for more fantasy points than Saric. So of the cheap guys, Rondo, I project for more fantasy points. Torrey Craig, Luke Kennard, Patrick Beverley, Ivica Zubac. So Dario Saric I find to be a pretty weak play today. And by the way, we did just get starting lineups. That has been something that a lot of people have been asking about. So for the Suns, no surprises: Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Bridges, Crowder, Eytan. From the Clippers side of the game, Jackson, Beverly, George, Morris, and Zubac. So that means Marcus Morris is returning to the starting lineup today.
Right. So Morris was back in, and we knew that he was playing at least with the knee, the questionable game time decision earlier in the day. It's a name that we kind of haven't talked about. Now we know he's starting, so clearly the injury is not expected to be anything hampering for him. How are you approaching Marcus Morris back in the starting lineup?
Yeah, so it's been tough because even though Marcus Morris has been playing, he's been listed as questionable for all these games, and he played much better in the previous playoff series than he did in this one. So the minutes also haven't been there for Morris as of late, and I think that could be a couple of things. Number one, I don't think this is a great matchup for him, at least not as good of a matchup as some of the other matchups that the Clippers have had in the postseason. And that even though he's out on the court, I think that he's very far from 100%, kind of like we've seen from Bogdan Bogdanovic as of late, where he's been out there every game for the Hawks, but he's always been listed as questionable. And then he plays and be like, oh, okay, he doesn't look all that great. He's clearly not healthy. And I think that's kind of something we're seeing from Morris, his playing time in this series: 21 and a half minutes, 24 and a half minutes, 23 and a half. So even though he's starting, I still only expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 minutes from him. And there's other guys I'd rather get to. I don't think he's totally healthy.
All right, we have a super chat and then a bunch of activity on the premium Slack as well. Sons of Chaos, Beverly, Zubac, or George, DK Cash Captain. So of those three,
that would be George. Just based on ownership, it's George. So we have Paul George projected for about 30% captain ownership right now. Ivica Zubac's only projected for 4%. I really do like Ivica Zubac as a captain play overall, but just as the safest guy for cash game purposes, Paul George.
Harrison Edmonds on the premium Slack, Greg. Bridges versus Crowder. We talked about them with the projection and looking at minutes. I guess it would just be a matter of ownership here.
Bridges versus Crowder, just straight up.
Yep.
Let's see. I have Crowder projected for slightly more fantasy points. He's also more expensive. But as long as you have the money, I would go up to Crowder.
Jets World is running in that 555 DK GPP. So wants a little advice here for some big money, Greg. Paul Booker, Paul Eytan, or Booker Eytan? Which is the best combo of those three?
That is Paul and Booker. So, I mean, even though I think that Devin Booker's going a little bit over-owned in the captain spot at about 15%, I mean, still, I have Chris Paul and Devin Booker both projected for over 40 fantasy points, and Eytan just isn't nearly as good of a fantasy producer as those guys. So, yeah, it's Chris Paul and Devin Booker.
All right, last, I did see some, actually, a pretty good observation here. First off, Channel Surfers reminding us, I guess Corey Hart is the song Sunglasses at Night. Did you know that?
No.
Well, it now makes sense that Butthole would bring up Corey Hart in a sunglasses conversation, because Corey Hart wrote probably one of the most famous songs about sunglasses, wearing your sunglasses at night. But it took multiple levels of trying to figure that all out. So it's a little bit lost.
Have you been Googling this for the last 20 minutes?
Did you?
No, I said, did you? I don't know. How'd you come up with it?
No, I just saw this. This came in at 8:43. Channel Surfers on the premium Slack. Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night song. So now I'm trying to put it back all together there. Yeah. Now, Mike Peterson with a pretty insightful observation here, Greg.
Listen, anybody who knew that information offhand, I think less of you as a human being.
Well, that's Butthole Jenkins, first and foremost.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, Butthole is knocked down a little bit, a peg or two on your list. Is that right after this?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because usually somebody like a Butthole Jenkins I hold in very high regard, but not when I find out that he knows the whole discography of Corey Hart.
That's it. I mean, it's just a matter of Butthole, cut the crap. Who's the best singer from Canada? That's what we want to know, Jenkins. All right.
Yeah. Well, best player on the slate, at least to his normal question, is Paul George.
Yeah. Now, Mike Peterson says little Shander is crying because I taught him the Fly Eagles fly on day 2 of his life. So he can't come to terms with the Red Sox shirt. And Mike's saying that I can't bring the baby down and touch this shirt.
Why? I mean, what if he throws up on the shirt? Wouldn't that be like Philly pride?
Yeah, you're right. I probably should just have it as like a rag, just like desecrate the rag. Do whatever you possibly can for it. That's fine. Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now,
I think we had some other questions. Didn't we have more questions in the premium Slack chat?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Moneybags. He had asked
that just Eytan came in now, yeah?
Eytan and Rondo or Booker and Craig. That is Booker and Craig for me.
Yeah, and then a couple of questions just about fading Booker. And I think just to go back to that, it wasn't about fading Booker. It was just about weight to the field versus Chris Paul, Paul George, and even DeAndre Ayton. So I don't think that there was anything about fading Booker. It was more just about being a little more underweight than maybe someone else. Tall to God just slides in here. You think Pat Bev gets 30 minutes tonight? Boy, if you do, that would be a pretty interesting captain option.
Yeah, I don't think he plays 30 minutes just because that's not the workload we've seen him play as of late. So the last 2 games, he's played 27 and 26 minutes. And I think we could say that, maybe if the last game wasn't a blowout, we could have seen him push for 30. But when is the last time Patrick Beverley played 30 minutes in a game this year? I'm scrolling through his box scores.
Right.
It was January 13th was the last time that he played 30 minutes. So that's not to say he can't do it, but it's been so long that I can't project that to be the most likely outcome.
So I had a couple I wanted to throw at you. Now that Terrence Mann is out of the starting lineup, we had on Odd Shopper a pretty good percentage, 77% X win of Terrence Mann going over 3.5 rebounds. So that's the just kind of looking at that specific prop. But I do wonder now, again, knowing that Mann is going to take a little bit of a back seat in the starting lineup, not now starting as we've seen him. Are you looking to maybe fade a lot more of Mann, not from a DFS standpoint, but from a player prop standpoint?
Yeah, if there are still props available for him that still represent his role expected as a starter, then yeah, for sure. Like Terrence Mann should see significantly reduced minutes now coming off the bench. I think he's more likely to play under 30 minutes than he is to play over 30 minutes. So yeah, I'm just going to pull up some player props really quick. But yeah, if there are books that have not taken down and have not adjusted Terrence Mann props, they would definitely make sense to bet unders.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson, Mr. June, is at 19.5 points tonight. It's a tough number to get to, 20 points in general. Even if you are a superstar, it's not an easy thing to do. and you're going to get the value is not a ton of return, but it's going to be juiced a little bit to the over. And I would be inclined to go under that, knowing that Reggie can still have a game. He can still be impactful. He can still be part of a victory tonight. But I don't know if he gets to 20 points. And if I were to make a play on that, I'd go under 19.5 for Reggie Jackson.
I lean towards under 19.5. I have him projected for about a little over 18.2. So, I mean, it's not somebody I look at Reggie Jackson. I think it's the strongest bet in the world. But if I had to pick one side, I would go with the under for Reggie.
All about trying to find you some value here, man. Return money on the positive end. I know you're a numbers guy, and you hate the narratives, the bullshit narratives I come up with surrounding these bets. If it doesn't make sense from a money standpoint, I can get you. And last I saw before we started the show, it was moving up, at least in PA, to a plus 105 return. Maybe even now, depending on where we are right before the gate closes, plus 110. Over 1.5 assists for Jay Crowder. That's a low number. He's not in that role per se to be a facilitator, but with minutes and not in foul trouble, you're telling me I can't get 2 dimes tonight from Crowder to get plus 110 back?
Yeah, I would go towards the over on that one also, even in the 3 games this series. So last game, he had 0 assists. Although he also got in foul trouble. He fouled out fairly quickly in that game. Jay Crowder only played 28 minutes. It was a blowout. He fouled out in those 28 minutes. But first 2 games of the series did have 3 assists and 2 assists. So yeah, I have him projected for slightly over 2 assists. So a plus money. I think that is a profitable bet.
Do you see anything else from a prop standpoint you'd like? Now, again, everything as you see here, Tyler pulls it up. Everything is done at OddsShopper. The work is done for you. The homework is done for you. So you don't have to worry and fret about where to find the best value. But I was just trying to look at a couple of those. Now, again, Terrence Mann being moved back to the bench is going to be huge here, but you can always also pop into No House Advantage because I'm sure every line that was set in NHA was expecting Terrence Mann to start. So you could probably crush a bunch of unders there. All right, my friend, any final thoughts here on this optimal lineup that we can build up? And I guess from just throwing out where we are, a couple of names that we've hit, I'm going to guess that both Paul George and Ivica Zubac are going to land in your optimal lineup tonight multiple times over.
Yes, and then I think we've talked about pretty much all the players at this point. I'll just check really quick to make sure. Not that, I mean, if I was to answer anybody's question, they just put in now. By the time we answered, it would already be past the time for lock. But Jets World just asked, how big of a downgrade is it for Terrence Mann not starting? It's a pretty significant downgrade. I think that cuts off like 6-7 minutes off of what I would expect him to play. I think good thing to close with, though. Who wins tonight? I'm going to say the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, I'm going back and forth on this, man. I'm really going back and forth. I saw it drop now to a pick 'em. So that value, I guess, for the Clippers is gone now, that point and a half, depending on where you want. Man, I hate to go against you, Greg Ehrenberg, but I think the Clippers tie it up tonight. I'm not betting it, if that makes you feel any better. At least not until I see the tip.
Yeah, I mean,
What is it about Phoenix that you really like tonight? Because now I'm thinking maybe I should bet it.
I'm just a Chris Paul mark. I mean, I've been betting them since before the season started, doing the championship when they traded for Chris Paul. So I am. I've been on the Suns all year and not jumping off now.
Awesome. Well, look, I do appreciate you mentioning the Boston shirt and ripping my son and not bringing up the wound that is still not fully healed about the exit of my basketball team. So on a basketball show, not one quip or remark or shot at Ben Simmons or anything else. That is probably the most impressive thing of all, Greg, tonight. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Hey, that was I didn't even. I'm upset that I didn't get to bust your balls about the Sixers losing. Because listen, the last time we did a show together, you were not a father. Your favorite basketball team was still in the playoffs, and listen, now you have a kid that the chat doesn't like, and your favorite team isn't playing.
You know what? All of that is good, and you're right. We still got over 400 likes. All right, so bleep everybody and my kid. No, thank you all for watching. Thank you for making this a part of your night. Good luck to everybody. Make sure you're following everybody here on Twitter at Awesemo_com, at G Ehrenberg DFS, at Shander Show for me. Thank you, Tyler, as always, for producing a great show. Monkey Knife Fight. Make sure you take advantage of our promo code there. And yeah, all right, look, I never said that I would be locked into a bad decision. So I'm going to flop on the other side and roll with the Suns tonight. Maybe even place a little bet tailing one Greg Ehrenberg. Does that work?
Let's go for it. I do have a bet on the Suns for tonight. I think they should be favored by more than 1 point now that Chris Paul is back and healthy. The Suns closed as 1.5 point favorites last game. And, it's not a massive move, but they're only 1 point favorites today. I think it should be slightly more significant.
13 baby haters out there. Thomas Tyner with a pretty good observation. I think Greg secretly hit the dislike too, but that's just me. I wouldn't put that out there. All right. For Greg Ehrenberg, Tyler, the rest of the Awesemo community, thanks again. We'll see you bright and early. More things happening tomorrow, so stick with us and have a great night.